Hey, church family, welcome back to the FBC Durant podcast. I'm Garrett.
I'm Corey. And joining us today is Sebastian and Esme.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Welcome. Glad you guys are here. So we're going to continue our series in our pillars of our mission and vision pathway within our church, starting with worship. We talked to Kim Bartholomew, our minister of worship, and we're going to move into connection today, talking about the concept of moving from the worship service to a smaller group of people, which can be a brave move, can be challenging sometimes when you're used to sitting in a worship service, but you know you need to take that step further and be a part of maybe a life group, which is what we have in our church, or some other ministry that you connect to and relate with. So that is part of the goal today as we visit with Sebastian and Esme. But first,
yes,
we want to play a game called First Takes. We introduced with Ken in the last episode. And so the concept is this. I'm going to give you a topic, and you just tell me the first things that come to mind.
Let's do it.
Okay.
All right, let's go. Okay. Speaking of fellowship, one of our strongest fellowships within First Baptist Durant are our potluck dinners. Prior to the business meeting, we like to get nice and warmed up for that. What would you bring to a potluck, two-piece? What are you looking forward to at a potluck dinner? What would you bring, and what are you looking forward to?
I would bring something that can be easily bought by the store on my way.
Preach.
Okay.
Yeah, I got that.
Yes. Never homemade, always home bought. So that's what I would bring.
I think I would bring, depending on the potluck, I think we're really good here at FBC Durant to have theme potlucks, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm really thankful for that because it helps me like determine what I need to bring. But I would say I wouldn't ever do dessert because the women here at FBC Durant do that wonderfully by themselves.
They
don't need any help.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking forward to. I would answer that, dessert, always.
Yeah.
But I would bring, I don't know, I would definitely just do the first thing in my Pinterest board. That
there we
when
go.
I look up
Nice.
Pinterest, like if it's
helpful.
either like a side or anything, I would just go Pinterest and see the first thing.
First thing on that.
First
I like
thing on
that.
there.
I like that. Very cool.
You said you look forward to the dessert?
Yeah, I always look forward to the dessert.
Yeah, we have our staples set up
Nice.
at the potluck. You know, like so and so's bringing this, and I'm gonna get some of that, and so and so's got their thing that they make.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool how
See, I'm
that
still trying to
develops.
figure that out. So I'm just looking forward to everything.
Right.
But I got to find out who does what.
A good sampling.
Yeah.
That's only the polite thing to do.
Exactly.
I think.
Yeah, the dessert here is like so good that a lot of people get their food and the dessert at the same time because everyone's scared that it's gonna be gone by the time we eat. If you next pod, like notice how many people do that because it's actually a lot of people that do
that's
that.
funny.
I do that.
is
but
strangely
Makes sense.
factual. I agree with that. I've seen that done. I might have done that. Who knows? All right, here we go. Next one. Speaking of fellowship also, what is your opera house order? What's your go-to opera house order?
Oh, man. Oh, the alto.
Oh,
Sorry, I'm going food. We still
I
go
was
food.
like, what?
sure.
I was like, I've never had an alto at the opera.
It's the alto grilled chicken. And then just a sweet tea.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I have to give the biggest shout out to Hannah Sorrells for this.
Okay.
Cold brew with vanilla mint syrup with oat milk is the best thing. It's literally the best thing. It's very refreshing, and it tastes like coffee still, but it still has a little bit of sweetness to it. Only 2 pumps because the syrup there is really, really sweet. But yeah, that's my
I got what I was
order.
asking for. I needed something specific.
Yeah, that's what my
You're
specific.
ordering
When
on
you
a
said
different
alto,
level
I was
than me.
like, I've never had an alto.
Well, I always go there to meet people for
Food.
lunch and stuff. So
But
I'm
you
always
said add
eating.
grilled chicken, right?
Yes.
Yeah. See.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
So
thought. What do you got?
Yeah.
There's like a menu. So I just that.
Corey's like
Give me
the
some.
chocolate one.
Yeah, I didn't know there was like Esme's over there like this many pumps.
No
There's
joke.
things I don't know about.
This is
It's
really
like a
bad.
secret menu over there.
I know.
No, this is bad. I go up to the corner, to order, and they're like, I order everything. They're like, you only want 2 pumps, right? And I was like, yeah.
Oh,
They know me. I was like, so I go
nice
there
to
so
pump.
often. Yeah,
that's awesome.
they know me too much.
I go on Tuesdays
Oh,
for the poblano soup.
that's really good.
That's really how I schedule my
really
week.
good.
All right, next one. Student ministry lock-ins. Your thoughts? Do you-
That's
But have you done one?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
done plenty. Been a part of plenty. lots of regrets. Lots of stories.
Regrets were made.
Yes, decisions were made that probably shouldn't have been made. Oh my goodness. It's one of those, like, I'm not a fan, but if the students want it, it's one of those, like, we'll do it.
Surely they've died by now, right? Are they
Actually,
still a thing?
Not as big as it used to be.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, it really, really was big back in the day, but yeah, like, at some, like, the youth forums I'm a part of, like, you don't see a whole lot of them bring it up. And it's one of those, it's like that taboo word, really.
Yeah.
When someone brings up lock-in, like, everybody is just like a cringe face all the way through.
It's a thing.
So.
I will never forget, I was a gullible college student that was just down for anything, and Gary brought me to an overnight, like, Cole, what was it? It was like an event. Like, we went to Oklahoma City and stayed up all night. It was wild. Did you ever do that? No, you probably stayed home.
I mean, like, Stuart Tilley made us do a lock-in once at Western Meadows, and it was a horrible idea.
Yeah.
I was against it from the second, and of course it was awful. So, but we used to do a thing here, like at FBC when I was a student, called The Last Day. You got dropped off at midnight on December 31st and not picked up until midnight of New Year's.
What?
It was a 24-hour event.
Wow.
Yeah.
The last day.
Yeah. We threw around the idea
Happy
of
New
one,
Year's.
and then we imagined kids running around this church overnight, and we were like, we can't.
It's
Sorry.
tough. Yeah, there's a limit.
Yeah.
Oh, it's all good. All right. Speaking of connection, this one may be more of a challenge. Off camera, we're trying to think through this. What would be your most awkward church connection moment? Like, you're trying to break the ice and maybe introduce yourself or be part of a smaller group.
It wasn't really, it wasn't awkward. One time I actually joined a senior adult small group.
Yeah.
And I didn't know it until like halfway through. And I don't know why I didn't know it. Like, we're just sitting there, I'm looking around, like,
Didn't know it.
it's like, man, what's going on? And they were friendly. It was great. It was nice.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was awkward. I don't really have like an awkward moment, like, of trying to like really connect in or try to talk to somebody.
Let's go. That's a blessing for sure.
I definitely do. As I was joining the BCM like ministries that we have here at Southeastern, I walked up to, I didn't know anyone, and so I was trying to like, try to connect and like just introduce myself to people. And I walked up to this guy who I thought was the director. And I'm like, and I go to him, I'm like, hey, like, nice to meet you. My name is Esme. He's like, oh, like, really nice to meet you. My name is Will. And I was like, okay, like, that's so awesome. Like, Will Sandman, like, okay, really nice to meet you. You're super cool. Like, love what you're doing here. He was like, thanks. And then I turn around and like, I'm not kidding, like, turn around and I meet another guy. And I'm like, hey, like, what's up? And he's like, hey, what's your name? I'm like, oh, my name's Esme. What's your name? He's like, oh, my name is Trey. I was like, oh, that's cool. And I just walk away. And for like 2 days, I thought that Will Sandman was the director and Trey was just a student. And that was very embarrassing because then I think by the end of the night, I realized that when he went up to speak and like teach the lesson. And I was like, oh no,
my gosh.
And so after that, I went up to the guy, Will, and I was like, who are you? I thought you were the director.
That's hilarious.
But
Will
that was
did not correct her when
No.
she was complimenting the great job he was
Will.
doing.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
just took
That
the
Will.
glory. He's like,
That's such a thing you would do. That's amazing.
Well, like, I think he was just like, just being kind to a new person, He was just going along with like,
I'll be
yeah,
the
we have a
director.
good ministry going here. But I mean, I didn't specifically say like, I think you're the director, but it was really funny.
awesome.
And when I saw Trey walk up on the stage, I was like, I'm really embarrassed that I treated this rando guy like the director and the director as a rando guy.
Yeah.
So,
He fits
yeah.
the bill. I mean, they're similar for sure. I like to think Trey saw all that and he just let it ride to see how long it would take.
Yeah, probably.
So yeah, connection. And that can come with awkward moments. Thankfully, I feel like we have ministries that are very hospitable and welcoming and do a great job of making people feel welcome, which is really important. And it can be maybe a challenging jump to socially start mixing it in with a smaller group. And we'll talk about what that looks like within our church. But before we get into that, we haven't had a chance to get to know Esme much, her first time here. So if you would share a little bit about your story and then how that's led you to where you are today within the ministry role you serve at our church.
Yeah. So a little bit of my story is that I was actually born in Mexico, and I was born there. And about when I was 5 years old, I went to Houston, Texas, where I started learning a lot about just being able to transition well and stuff like that. Growing up, I didn't have very much contact with religion other than being Catholic, but just like culturally, we had like Mother Mary in the wall. We had baby Jesuses, kind of stuff like that. But I've never read the Bible, never heard the gospel. I just knew of God. And as I was growing up, that was kind of the idea that I had religiously. And then my parents separated, and in Houston, my stepdad and my mom met. We moved to Antlers, Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
So in Antlers, Oklahoma, the deep Bible Belt, that's when I first the gospel for the first time. And for me, that was a really hard time to just settle in to Antlers, Oklahoma, from being in Mexico and then Houston, Texas, which is still very much has a very big Hispanic population. Mm-hmm. I walked into a classroom in Antlers, Oklahoma, and no one looked like me. A lot of people asked me, "Are you Choctaw?" And I was like, "No, I'm Mexican." They were like, "What is that?" Like, what does that mean? And like fair questions. These are all fair questions. I'm not, but it wasn't very welcoming. It was very hard for me to feel not alone, because then obviously I lived in the end of the dirt road, 10 acres by myself. I'm the only child, so it was just me and my thoughts, and it was really, really, really hard. And I reached a really low point of feeling lonely, not feeling like anyone cared, feeling like there's just like no hope. There was it just really didn't matter at the end of the day. And thankfully, I spent a summer, and that was the hardest summer ever, feeling that way. When I went back to middle school, a friend invited me to youth group. And for me, I did not know what that meant. I was like, somebody's inviting me outside of the house, outside of the school. I have a friend. I'll literally do anything. I'm on it. Obviously they said we'll have games, we'll have food. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm there. I was that kid. I was that kid for like 2 years that went to FBC Antlers, to Wednesday nights only for the food and the games and the people. That's my story, and just hearing the gospel over and over and over again. But again, because of my life story of abuse and very difficult things in my life, I just didn't think it was real. I had a hard time believing that it was a borderline to prosperity gospel of God is good, God is love. It was kind of hard for me to believe that. Because of my story, I was like, that's not for me, or it's not, I can't believe it. And in 8th grade, I went to another fun event called FCA Game Day at OU, men's basketball game. Yeah. This is really fun. And for the first time ever, we watched a game. It was fun. After it, they have a speaker. They had a basketball guy speak, and the first time ever, I heard a testimony. Mm-hmm. And this testimony was still of this guy had one parent, as I had growing up, abusive relationships and all that stuff. It was very similar to mine, but for the first time ever, I heard the gospel presented to me, and Jesus specifically as a redeemer, the person that was going to get me from the brokenness that I had, the pain that I had, and the perfectness and love of God. Jesus was the middle. That was the gateway. That was the bridge, That day, that guy in his testimony bridged that for me. And so that's the day I got saved. And I just accepted God into my life and said, you are real, and and Jesus is the only way that I can get to you. I 100% know that. And so from there, 8th grade, I started going to church now on Sundays and all that stuff, and reading my Bible because I wanted to, and that was fun. And then I had the 4 most hard years of high school. It was so hard. I started getting my papers to become, a legal resident here in the United States. My mom we had a little scare a big scare for 3 months that she might not get her papers and get sent back to Mexico. That was hard, losing someone that I've always had. But at the same time, because of God, like the Lord, that was the first time that he was like, I was able to not just pray, like, keep my mom here, this is what I want. I remember the day, like, I turned that in, like, Lord, just make me strong enough to what you have for me. Like, that's a big pivotal point of, like, my story of the Lord teaching me, you're so stubborn and you have so much to learn. And unfortunately that I have to give you, in Hebrews it talks about like a father is so loving when he disciples and discerns his children. And like that's what I was learning 4 years of my life back to back. Unfortunately my parents divorced when I was in junior year. That was like the breaking point for me. Instead of turning to the Lord like he has been wanting me to, like from freshman year to junior year, I was like, it's easier to just run to sin. And it is. Yeah. It is easier to run to sin instead of running to the Lord and like facing all that. Yeah. And so junior year, senior year, I fell back into just sinfulness and my own desires and numbingness of the world to escape, my parents' divorce and like all this hard, troubling things. And then again, I hit another just living in my own sinfulness. Now it was a choice now at this point of my life, but again the Lord is a redeemer. And I went to UNT my freshman year of college. And I went to UNT and I remember they dropped me off and you have this awkward, really scary moment over like, I don't even know where the bathroom is in this place. Like I'm by myself. Like I moved out there, my parents moved me out there, but I had no one, like zero, started from scratch. And the Lord brought me to my knees in my dorm room in my heart in conviction of like, if I don't choose Christ now, like I'm going to drift away so far away, like, and it will be hard to come back unless I do so now. Like the Lord brought me to a point of repentance of my sin and like to fully just give him everything in my freshman year. And so when I started my freshman year of college, I told myself like I went on a sabbatical basically. Like I was addicted to like drugs and alcohol and I cold turkeyed everything and I didn't listen to any music other than worship music. I didn't make any friends outside of a college ministry or church. Like I was like, I know where I am and I know what I've done and I know my state of my own sinful desires and my fragileness in the state and I know what I need to do. And so that was the first time where I dove really deep into the Lord and he has been faithful. Since then, I learned for the first time discipleship. I learned college ministry, like not youth group, in a small town youth group, but like people that you do every day, because you get this new freedom of your life that you don't have to go to school with these people, like you choose to do life with these people. So that was sweet. And then the Lord again broke me down. As you can tell, I'm very stubborn and don't listen. And so the Lord, I don't blame this at the Lord at all. It's just something that the Lord has to do because I am very stubborn. He broke me down again and I got baptized my freshman year of college and I was doing really good, learning, loving the Lord. But at the end of the day, he brought me back to a very fragile place of like, I'd never really questioned or asked the Lord if this is where he wanted me to be at UNT. So I was like, okay, back to square one. So again, not giving him another part of my life of like asking him, what do you want? Where do you want me to live? What do you see for in my future? Like not just every day, but like beyond that, like who do you want me to be in the future? As college is a really big, important decision to make. And in that, I served at KBA, and at KBA, the Lord pointed me to just give it all to him. And this is really funny. Durant was never in the plans for me, ever. As I live in Antlers, it's only an hour away from here. It was called South Easy. No one really wanted to come here. It's just like a bigger Antlers, kind of thing. That was the speculation back then. But on my way to UNT, because I was like, I'm going to try this again. I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask the Lord what he wants from me. I was on my way to Denton, and in Atoka, a friend calls me and says, hey, I heard you were looking for a job. And I was like, that's crazy because I haven't really told anyone. But she was like, I have a job. I'm about to leave. there's a banking job in Durant if you want it. And I was like, sure, like, I'll check it out. She was like, okay, where are you? And I was like, I'm in Atoka. She was like, okay, I'm going to tell him you're there in 30. And I was like, okay. And so, like, I literally changed on the side of the road to, like, an interview. Like, I was not prepared. Like, this was, like, I was in Atoka, like, legitimate, like, no plans at all. I walked out with a job. And then my best friend from high school said, hey, my sister's roommate just moved out. Do you need a place to live in Durant? And I was like, actually, I do. And so... That's how I ended up in Durant. Like, that's just crazy. The Lord. Wow. Like, literally, I didn't have any plans. I didn't want to go. I didn't know where I wanted to do with my life at all. Just praying and trying to be obedient. And the Lord just provided a job and a place. And so I said, well, that's it for me. And so ever since then, I've been in Durant. That was in 2021. And so I took a year off of school, worked full time. And then I started going back to school at Southeastern with a communications major, and I've just been plugged in to FBC actually since the moment I got here. It was really nice, cool. And I loved it here, and so I've been also really involved in the BCM ministries here on campus, which are amazing, which actually kind of tie together really well, and I would say also just continuing to surrender myself to the Lord and what He wants me to do. I asked Him if ministry is something that He wanted me to do, and I literally prayed to the Lord, and He called me to give everything to Him again. I quit all my jobs that I had like a year ago. I was about to go overseas to Germany for the summer, and so I actually had 2 months before I left, and He was like, focus on where I wanted you to go in ministry. And I don't know why. I was like, I think I want to talk to Gary about this. And then I talked to Gary about this, and in that meeting he said, oh yeah, it's real. Let's make it happen. And that's, again, just like that. That's how I am here today as a girls ministry assistant, of just like complete obedience to the Lord and giving Him everything. So,
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
That's part of the blessing of going through some of these pillars and talking to our staffers is just hearing their story and their heart behind what they're doing. There's so much below the surface that contributes to how they serve and why they serve and things like that. So thank you very much. Corey, the wheels are turning.
Oh, no, I'm just like processing all that story, because we're just here to learn, talking about connection and how much like connection kept coming up in your story. I mean, you're born in Mexico, you end up in Houston, which has large Hispanic population, so it's not as much of a culture shock, but then you end up in Oklahoma, total cultural shock, and so like, but because someone, and that's kind of my experience, I never went to youth group until some kid moved next door and invited me, and I was like, and kind of same thing, sold it as, well, there's food and games, and other kids our age, and you're like, cool, that's a reason to go, and so, but I mean, it's like, how much connection just comes, like a desire to just be around people, even, and then that snowballs, rolls down the hill, gets bigger and bigger and bigger until essentially, it transcends just going for community's sake, but like community, like then entangling with Christ and your faith and how that all works out together. And so I just was thinking about how awesome that your testimony kind of really goes in line with what we're talking about today, and just, and then,
I thought the same thing, that it was threaded all through your story. It was connection, and I guess we can all go back to the point where we, I guess, took that step towards church because of somebody, but even more so, like God's story kind of playing in the background, and then coming to this point of faith where am I going to decide to step forward with what He's leading me into or not? And sometimes, thankfully, involves other people. Welcoming you and bringing you into the fold or whatever the group might be. So other than just being a brave step from the pew to, say, the Sunday night college fellowship, or going to the potluck dinner that night, or going to life group, I think it's important to know that there's something going on that the Lord has for you behind all of that. That's important to note, that I don't think I've thought about so far in what we were going to talk about today. I guess why would let's discuss, why is connection important? Why is it important for someone to finally step into a smaller group? To get in the doors of the church is obviously super significant. Being with one another in a worship service and singing together and hearing the word together and being accountable to it is important. But why do you feel, or what do you see in ministry that tells you connection is important, or for someone to be in a smaller group? What do you think? What's your thoughts?
You want that?
Sure. I could tell you that it's just night and day, honestly.
Yeah.
Because first you have to get here, which is 100% true. Love it.
Yeah.
Getting poured in, getting yourself familiarized. Hopefully that we can connect to you.
Yeah.
So you'll be comfortable in taking those next steps. I feel like we try really hard to do so. But also, it's just so different when you're able to even just discuss what you think you know about the word, and having someone not necessarily older, but just like has been running the race farther than you have. I think that my favorite moments happen at our student journey groups, like talking about student journey groups or my journey groups in college, either way, where our girls feel comfortable asking questions and receiving answers right away, and like being able to have a conversation about it. So as you are in a pew or in a life group even, and you're listening and you're getting scripture and all that stuff, you might have questions, and that's 100% awesome, and that's really good. But also I think in the smaller groups that you keep, like the smaller you get, the more questions and more answers you're able to get and have a conversation about, where I think a lot of growth happens.
That's good.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. I mean, the connection part, like what makes it so good is that it gives you an opportunity to talk with other Christians.
Yeah.
When we're in our own lane in life throughout the week, Monday through Friday, of doing life, whether it's going to school, doing a job and stuff, we get in a rhythm of how we do things, and we get stuck in that rhythm. And in the midst of that, there's not always an opportunity just to have a conversation with somebody about scripture, about questions, or about anything in that. And so when we're able to connect with others into a smaller group setting, we can have that. We can finally have that conversation that we've been missing throughout the week. Because throughout the week, we're just being bombarded by everything else in the world. And we can be in our Bible study. We can have great quiet time and prayer time and all of that. But we're still missing out on that opportunity to talk with others.
Yeah.
And so those small groups really just kind of provide that. And I see that with the students in life groups. It gives them that chance that they can talk to one another. They know that, or they assume that everybody in there is a Christian. And so they can have the conversations, they can have the discussions that you don't get to have when you're in school listening to a teacher teach you.
Yeah.
Or even when you're at lunchtime, where all you're thinking about is just lunch and then whatever else is happening all around you.
Yeah.
And then even like for as adults or people with families, like I have 4 daughters. My conversation with my wife a lot of times is around our family and stuff.
Yeah.
But to have a life group, have like a Sunday school or a connection class or whatever it is out there, just to be able to disconnect from everything of the world and just talk with other Christians.
Yeah.
I think we take that for granted so much, and when we finally get it, it's so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. It's needed.
Yeah.
Philippians 2, which is imitating Christ, humility, kind of how we relate to one another. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of mind. And then later it says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. So y'all were mentioning, like, whether you're sitting and taking in the sermon by yourself, or even your quiet times with the Lord, and obviously he can reveal things and show things to you, but to have that group that you have a soundboard of what's going on in your heart and what you're hearing, and making sure that it's in one accord with what the scripture would say, that accountability and encouragement and even insight from a more seasoned saint is hugely beneficial. And that only comes about once you take that step of faith into a smaller group.
Yeah.
of believers. Corey, what's your experience? Small group experience.
So, my question would be, y'all are both pretty charismatic, talking to people. Would y'all say like connection comes a little bit easier? Like you can go into a room and it's pretty easy to connect with people.
Oh no, definitely not.
Oh, okay. So,
I am a introvert, extrovert.
Okay.
I did not know that.
Okay, you're an ambivert.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. Yes.
It's a mix. You can adapt.
You say
either.
There you go. I can, but like I'd rather be at home sitting in a beanbag chair eating Cheetos.
Okay.
That's
Like,
relatable, though.
That's fair.
Like I'd rather do that. Keep to myself. I want to be like that old guy on the front porch in the rocking chair with the mason jar of sweet tea and no one else bother me.
All right. Hey.
But it's one of those, and it is interesting for me to say that because I get that a lot as far as like, oh, I didn't know that you were such an introvert. I really am. But it's what helps me to be able to connect with others, especially in church, especially with students and ministry and things. It's knowing that the reward is greater and better than my comfort.
Yeah.
And so it's not easy for me. It's not easy to try to pick up small talk with somebody. It's easier for me when it comes to students because that's my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so it's not easy when I'm with other adults and try to connect and try to talk. But it is something that I'm constantly working on and constantly trying to get past because again, I know the reward of being able to talk with others that are Christians is better than how I feel uneasy or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right. So long thing short, no, it's not as easy for me.
Yeah.
Well, like I would say that this has been a journey I've been on like since I got invited to youth group when I was 13. Like it's just connection's never been an easy thing for me. And then also like I'm almost 40, and so when I was in youth group, it was like the WWJD like kind of era where like being a Christian and a teenager wasn't taboo. It was just kind of it was almost cool, and so. I was never pegged as a leader kid. I never got invited to Super Summer or anything like that. I mean, and all that type of stuff. But then as I got older, you watch a lot of your classmates and those kids that are in youth group with you start throwing their faith in the trash. It's with the bracelets. They're just, it's gone. And so like, we're kind of that deconstruction age, like era also. We're kind of like, all right, what was real, what was manufactured, what was sold to us, how much of this did I actually pour into, how much of it was just a thing, and a trend. And so like, it's been a lot of walking through that, as I get into adulthood and you're like a lot of doubt, a lot of like, imposter syndrome, in terms of like your own faith. And like, so, and I think, I've only been like, back here at FBC for like 3 years, and it was a year-long transition of my wife and I leaving our former church and coming here, and nothing scandalous. It was just I found that I was really just not happy at church, and like it was a long conversation. It was meeting with our old pastor and meeting with Gary, for a year because we wanted to do our due diligence and everything. And I remember saying like, hey, one of the things I like about FBC is it's a lot bigger and I can hide.
Yeah.
I can just show up and like just do the worship pillar. Like I can just come to church, be happy. I was like telling him, I was like, I don't want to do music. I don't want to be a part of anything. I just kind of want to show up. And of course Gary's like, well, that's dumb and you can't do that. Like, he's like, and that's why these conversations were, what they are. And I mean, he's like, hey, it's fine if you do that for like a couple weeks or, or whatever, but like, eventually we're going to, challenge you and all that stuff. And I was playing music here within like 2 weeks of joining. And so like, and it was, but like, I knew it was going to be like a thing. And so when we came, I told my wife, we have to sit up front. If we just sit in the balcony or whatever, like, I'm just going to disappear. Yeah. I will hide, and I'll be comfortable doing it. And so, but like, this is the happiest I've been at a church ever. Which is great. And I think a lot of it has to do with being kind of in a church that's doing connection on all cylinders. I'm sure you can come in here and hide, but like, I just allowed myself to be just swept up in it, and just be like, all right, like, cool, I'll do whatever. And so, and it's been cool to be part of the worship team and develop relationships there. And like my wife's a part of the Hispanic ministry, and she's the only person in the Hispanic ministry not married to someone like also Hispanic. And so I am kind of this oddball out, but like that ministry has embraced me in a huge way. Like, you know, I hate New Year's, but I was at someone's house till 4 a.m. the other night, you know, because it was a Hispanic ministry party, and I'm like, whatever, dude, I'm just going with the flow here. Like, okay, the party starts at midnight. All right, I got it. And so, and like, it's singing and dancing and food, and it's cool because, and like, I get to see how much though, like, that ministry in terms of connection really blesses my wife. And a lot of those people who have left their homes and they're far away from family, and they just have that connection there. And it's great to be a part of that. And like the way that ministry just blesses me, and I'm just peripherally a part of it, you know? And so like, I do like look at connection as just like going deeper. Yeah. And it's taken a long time for me to get there, but I love that like I'm now in a church where I'm like able to like comfortably go deeper. And you know, when I finally got asked to be in a J group, I requested, I was like, that's great, but don't put me with people my age. I was like, you can give me like one my age. And so it was me and Micah Tennyson, and we got I think with some college kids. They didn't show up the first week, and then they didn't show up the second week, and we said, all right, so give us some like 80-year-olds. And so for a year I did a J group with like, it was me and Micah in our 30s, and then like the youngest one was like 78, and then some 8, and like that was one of the best experiences ever for a year, because it's not you can't just show up and talk about like, hey, we're all watching, listening, engaging in the same thing. You know, the small talk's hard, and you actually had to like learn about people and like get in that. And so like I love that that's a huge aspect of our church and such an important pillar of our church. And so that's been my experience, and it's been long, but I'm loving it here.
Something that like caught my attention, that when I moved to Durant and I started coming to FBC Durant, a friend that has actually grown up in the church here at FBC Durant told me was, your FBC is awesome, SBC is great, we all love FBC, but he told me like, you only get out as much as you want. That was literally, I remember the first thing that somebody told me about FBC Durant. After I told them that's where I've been going for a couple of weeks, they were like, this is awesome, but it is big. You can hide. And so I would encourage people, like, if you just step out a little bit, if you step out a little bit, you will get, like you said, like carried away with it and just be able to be poured in. It is good. It's not scary. It is scary, but it's good.
It is,
Yeah, I mean, the human side of things is, trying to find your way, figure out where you fit, where you belong. I mean, it's just like high school cafeteria. Like, you know what I mean? Like finding your table. I was in high school the other day, and I felt like I was a high schooler trying to find my way around. Anyways.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah, so that's part of being human. And then you add on top of that societal norms and the fact that we can hide in our phones. And when we're out on our Monday through Friday, you can go pick up your coffee and hide in your phone. Nowadays, you don't even have to interact.
Right.
So there's that level of, I guess, challenge we have to break through. But on the other side of that, God has a lot for us. I wanted to reference, because I think as we talk, we know the different ministries that we would point people to. And there's a long list. I was going to try to remember them. But for those that are listening and you're like, okay, what are these small groups, these places I can be a part of? And Corey referenced the Hispanic ministry, but there's several others.
I mean, you have student, you have college ministry. I mean, we have like you have senior classes. I mean, you have your life groups, which is, kind of like used to be called Sunday school, but now, there's some that happen outside of Sunday, but it is your small group. In which you're doing things. But I mean, last week, if you're at church, you saw that we have a divorce ministry. We have a Celebrate Recovery ministry, but also like you can do things where you can like go and request like, hey, I just want to be a greeter at the door. You don't know anyone. Guess what? That's the best way probably to just start getting to know people is like stand at the door and be like, hey, what's your name? Welcome. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just, it's simple as that. Like that's just, hey, like I just want to volunteer on Sundays just to like shake hands and tell people you can sit anywhere,
Yeah, one of my favorite groups that I've had the pleasure of joining are teenagers.
Yes.
What is that, once a month? Tuesdays, once a month?
On Tuesdays, yep.
Yeah, incredible lunch.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite places to be a part of that I got a chance to teach at, my best audience I've ever had, sing with, best congregation to sing with.
Yep.
It's a fun group, man. And we even, we were discussing earlier, homebound visitation. If you're listening to this somehow and you're not able to join us, man, connect with our church, call up here, and we'll come to you, which is incredible. Or if you're going through something and need some encouragement, that is something that we are able to do just to make sure that you stay connected, that you're linked in and a part of what's going on here at FBC Durant. So specifically for student ministry, how do you guys find ways to connect with your students? What are some strategies? This could be kind of an example for all the other ministries, maybe.
You want to go? I'm letting you go every time.
Okay.
I'm an introvert, remember?
I would say I would start first with the college ministry it's on the top of my head because we're literally doing this right now as we start the new semester tomorrow. So we're really busy right now. The best thing about connecting is being on campus as much as we can.
Yeah.
Like, it's open campus, so we're really thankful for that. So we do that as much as we can. We're hosting lunch at the new BCM building this Wednesday. We're really excited. And so actually most of our staff is going to be there serving lunch.
Awesome.
And so like not only us, me and Dustin, but like everyone and the staff is going to be able to meet around 250, 200, maybe 300 students. And I would hate to say it, but social media is really good.
For sure.
Social media, one of my parts in my job, both in the college and in the student ministry, but specifically college, is being where they are. And so as I go to school, as I go anywhere really on campus, it's connecting. It's the game of connecting. You asked if it was hard or easy. It's easy for me to do so, and as in that, I would consider that a strength, but not to like glorify myself, but literally like I've noticed that and I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do with this? And he's pointing me to ministry and this job. So that's really cool.
That is cool.
It's connecting. You have to make conversations with students at youth ministry, having conversations, because as I once was a youth student, again, in those Wednesday nights, you can easily hide as well, but you won't know what's going on. Or I love that Sebastian asked us what's your story? Not playing around, small talk is good, but at the end of the day, just going up to students and saying like, hey, what's your story? I would say mostly in student ministry, like in the youth, the outreach is our students. Like, we're not there. We can't go up to the cafeteria and sit down in middle school or in the high school. Yeah. It's us, equipping and encouraging our students to invite their fellow classmates and stuff like that. Because we can't, as in the college students, like we can put up a table and like share about who we are and what we're doing, serving lunch. Like we can't do that at the high school or the middle school. And we have a lot of high schools and middle schools represented in our youth.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we can't be all of there at once.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being available is a big part. Like she said, a presence on campus. It is harder on the student ministry side for the youth, for high school and middle school. But if there's an event, we can go to it. We want to be there. We want to cheer them on, regardless of what they're doing. But it really, and she touched on a good part of it. And one thing we try to focus on of how we can connect with the students. We don't try to see it as far as like I'm connecting with the students. It's like, how can we as a church? Well, it's through our students. So our student serve team, it's about empowering them and getting them as they reach out to others and they talk to others and they connect. And then when we do get to have a face-to-face conversation with them, it's about being intentional with those conversations. Not just shooting the breeze, but being really intentional, because we know it is hard to connect with them and to be there with them and meet them everywhere. And so, all right, I have them right here, you're in front of me. Now let's talk. Let's really talk. But we have a great group of students that have no problems with connecting with their peers and inviting them and even challenging them. But we try to do everything we can. Social media is huge on the student ministry side. Granted, there's only so much we can do and can interact. And so we try to do whatever we can from that standpoint. And then also, I talked about this before, connecting with the parents. So our weekly student newsletter goes out, and then the information with the parents. Sometimes when we can't connect it with the student through another student or other means, well, if their parent's there, then we can connect to the student through the parent. So that's another way that we try to as well.
Yeah. Very cool.
Let me ask you this. Because, obviously y'all are both working a student ministry. You're in college, you're in middle school, high school. And part of your responsibility is connecting with these students and stuff like that. But, obviously y'all also are a part of larger support teams, right? And, so can you speak on, even connecting there? The parents or, the volunteers that show up on Wednesday night and stuff, you're connecting with them, right? On this kind of shared goal of reaching students, and you're part of this bigger collegiate staff that's just helping and serving and stuff like that. So kind of speak to even just the benefit of that, connecting with the people who are serving with you,
So one thing I try to do with our volunteers, and it's something I'm still working through and trying to get better at, is understanding where they are more comfortable in helping. I don't want to force a volunteer into an area that they don't feel comfortable in. And so part of that is getting to know them a little better as far as okay, they like to teach more. Okay, let's give them an opportunity to teach. And just giving them the opportunities really helps them feel more connected into the ministry and involved in that. For example, our life groups. We don't do a big group teaching and then the life group leaders just kind of do a recap. No, our life group leaders for middle school and high school are the ones teaching the lesson.
Yeah.
And so they have more buy-in. We have better conversations whenever we talk about what we're teaching, the lesson and things like that. So we try to connect better on that. Yeah. Connecting with volunteers, I would say, is a hard thing to do. Because for me, when Wednesday nights come around, and I see my volunteers, well, my focus is students.
Yeah, right.
And so a flaw of mine is not really being able to connect and say hey, how's your week going? Or things like that. Just
it's
it's
time
more
to work.
Right. It's time to work and things to do.
Yeah.
And then outside of that, it's okay, I need to follow up with this person. I need to follow up. Last Wednesday, one of our volunteers asked if I could just talk afterwards. After our Wednesday night, they had clarifying questions about what we went over. And it was fun just to be on the phone for 30 minutes talking about just life and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's something I do neglect sometimes and miss out on. So I'm glad you asked that, because the volunteers part, it is a big area we need to do better in connecting with and making them feel important from that.
Yeah.
Something cool that just happened in the specifically my job as collegiate girls last semester. We were actually able to have some nights where we went to a woman's home and learned how to bake and cook
that's cool.
and stuff like that. And just seeing the joy that one of them was Hannah Swirls. So Hannah Swirls being able to teach how to make bread to these college stage girls, and not when they were making stuff, just the wisdom that would come out and all that stuff. Just the connection of the volunteers and people kind of interchanging, the people that help out in these things. It's just really cool being able to pour out into other people. Like you said, the big wide net of college ministry and stuff. We don't have specific volunteers. We just have people that want to pour into college students. And that's awesome. And I think that's a really good sign of a healthy church wanting to pour in. And even our volunteers, and I have a specific, I work with volunteers on Wednesday nights, to lead a group, and they're awesome. And I get to see them also use their gifts, as they're not in staff, and they have, we have, I think of one, and one of my volunteers is the tennis coach at Durant High School. And she does that, but she also gets to come on Wednesday nights and pour into these girls and set an example of hey, we are doing this at church, and we're doing it in the courts, and we're doing it in high school, in the halls, when she sees them as well, she holds them accountable. And that's I can't do that. Sebastian can't do that. Right. That's important to see those volunteers step up and, show them and be an example for them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's so awesome when you see the volunteers, the people you get to be around with, see the joy on their faces when they're getting to invest in an area that they love, that they're called to.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah. And then them just like giving us feedback, because we're thinking about so many other things, and they're like, hey, have you ever thought about that? And I'm like, no, but thank you so much. Actually,
definitely.
Thank you.
Point taken.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, that's really cool. I just, I was just thinking about that because I kind of got put in this weird experience. Garrett, Micah got put in a weird experience before you showed up, Sebastian, because there was no youth pastor. And, like Micah was doing camps, Garrett was put in charge of Wednesdays. And then Gary said, hey, we're starting a Sunday night thing. Corey, figure that out. And I was like, okay. And that was really rough because I wasn't like really plugged into Wednesdays or anything. And I'm just like texting Micah like, hey, could you tell them about this thing that we're doing Sundays? But like some Sunday nights you'd have, 8 guys show up. And that's great. And I also had mainly 6 volunteers, and like that were going to help. And I mainly was just given a key to the church, let everybody in and just kind of set it up, and then like let these guys really invest and pour in. And so, but then there were like weeks where like nobody shows up and it's just me and those dudes. Yeah. And like, I'm thankful because it was like, well, let's not cancel. Like what's going on in y'all's lives,
Yeah.
And so like, I just kind of like remember that season being kind of cool. Cause at first I was like going home and telling my wife, that's a little discouraging. Like, oh, none of these students are showing up. Yeah. But she's like, well, you were gone for 2 hours. Like, well, yeah, like me and those dudes like caught up on where they are in life, and we went through the lesson and just kind of like what they got. And I was like, that's just the Lord still kind of through connection, through like saying like, we're 2 or more of you are like showing up and doing it. I mean, this is church in a way, and it was really cool and blessing. And so I always think about that, and obviously we're on the worship team, which in of its weird self is its own small group in a very non-traditional way, like because we don't get to be a part of a lot of the small groups because they're happening while we're on stage. Most of them are, and so like we kind of become our own little tribe. Where on Wednesdays we do stop to go, hey, what's going on in everybody's life, and what do you need prayer for? And so, I mean, again, it's just you find connection in every little facet in this church, which is just amazing and great. And like, I'm thankful that it kind of becomes so natural in just the church experience here when you kind of step beyond that worship pillar where we talked with Ken last week. So much of the decision to join a church is, what's that service like? What's the music? What's the preaching like? What's it look like? You put all that kind of stuff into it, and that's how you step in. And then it's this go deeper part that is just, I'm thankful that it's like we've said, just if you just take a step in, you're going to get swept in. Yes. And it's going to be great. And so I like that.
Yeah. All right. So there's something to be said for showing up, for being here, for being faithful, to being a part of worship service. And then if you are interested, if you don't have a connection to any specific ministry, we would suggest maybe a life group. We have several different life groups that may fit your age group, or if you're open to anything, Pastor Jim Hodson can help connect you there. You can fill out one of our connection cards in the service. We've got fbcdurant.org. Cole may even link some of our social media stuff. Be a part of the student ministry, college ministry, whatever really will fit your needs. We have it, and we've heard and we know beyond student and collegiate ministry that all of our ministries are hustling because they want to connect with you, because they're driven by the faith that we have, the gospel that we feel is so urgent and important for everyone. So there's kind of 2 people here that we're challenging. If you are already attending and are already maybe even serving within a smaller ministry, there are people out there that need you to connect with them, to bring them here, because we know and we've learned that what's on the other side of these ministries and times with the Lord are super important to their lives. And if you haven't connected with us, you're just seeing this randomly or however you've seen it. We love you. We care about you. And we want you to come be a part of what's going on here at FBC Durant. So we haven't been able to cover everything in detail of our church and what's going on. But if you are interested in going back and learning in more detail about things going on within our church, the first 3 episodes of this podcast are called Discover FBC, and does a great job of explaining those things in full with Pastor Gary. So we want to challenge you to leverage your life and go and make disciples of all nations.